A billionaire visits his daughter's grave and finds a man, just a janitor, crying in front of her headstone with a small child beside him. But what happens when a wealthy father, on the anniversary of his daughter's death, realizes she had a secret child, and that child is standing right in front of him? The life of Richard Whitmore was like a fortress built of glass and steel, solid, luxurious, and cold. His penthouse sat on the 57th floor of the tower that bore his own name, overlooking the glowing lights of Manhattan. At 54, Richard was the embodiment of the American definition of success. His black hair had silvered at the temples, and his once razor-sharp blue eyes now carried heavy shadows, the weight of sleepless nights and regrets that could never be erased. His name was carved on skyscrapers, on Forbes covers. The press called him the real estate king of the Northeast. But in that lavish apartment, the only thing Richard's heart could hear was the echoing emptiness of his own life. Isabel Marie Whitmore. She died 10 years ago, on a rainy October night. The car lost control and plunged straight into the Hudson River. Isabel was only 24. Richard remembered every detail of that night. He had been in Tokyo, in a meeting for a $200 million acquisition. The phone rang at 2 in the morning. His assistant's trembling voice came through the line. The flight back took 14 hours. By the time he reached the hospital, it was already too late. A cold room, a white sheet covering a small body. Richard pulled the sheet back with trembling hands. Isabel's face looked peaceful, as if asleep, but her skin was frozen to the touch. "My daughter," his voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." But apologies made too late are just ghosts. When Isabel died, a part of Richard's soul went with her. For the entire 24 short years of her life, Richard had been the kind of father who was always absent. Not because he didn't love his daughter, he did, deeply, in his own way. But that love was always overshadowed by work, by meetings, by deals he kept convincing himself were impossible to skip. He still remembered Isabel's 6th birthday. She had begged him to stay home for her party with friends. But that day, a client flew in from Dubai. Richard chose the meeting. When he returned home at 11 p.m., Isabel had fallen asleep on the sofa, still wearing her pink princess dress. The birthday cake sat untouched on the table, its 6 candles long extinguished. His wife, Catherine, looked at him with cold eyes. "She waited for you until 9, then cried for 2 hours. Richard knelt beside his sleeping daughter, gently brushing her smooth hair. "I'll make it up to you, sweetheart. I promise." But he never fulfilled that promise. There was always another deal, another flight, another reason to be gone. By the time Isabel turned 12, Catherine filed for divorce. "I can't live with a man married to his work," she said. After that, Isabel saw her father less and less. By 18, she barely spoke to him. Richard had another child, Marcus, 6 years older than Isabel. If his relationship with Isabel had grown cold, then his relationship with Marcus was nearly shattered. Marcus once tried to follow in his father's footsteps, studied business, worked at Whitmore Enterprises for 3 years, but he couldn't take it anymore. "All you care about is profit," Marcus had shouted during their final argument 4 years ago. "You don't care about people? You don't care about me? You weren't even there when Isabel needed you the most." "You don't understand the pressure of running an empire," Richard fired back, his voice hoarse with anger and pain. "No!" "You don't understand," Marcus said, tears in his eyes. "You traded your family for skyscrapers, and what do you have now? 2 children who hate you." The words sliced straight into his heart. Marcus walked out that day. Since then, only a few short holiday emails. No calls, no family dinners, just silence. Every year, on October 14th, the day Isabel died, Richard followed a private ritual. He canceled all meetings, turned off his phone, and drove 2 hours to Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. The cemetery, old, quiet, sprawling beneath oak trees, looked more like a park than a burial ground. Isabel's grave was on a small hill, under an ancient oak. Richard chose it because Isabel loved trees. As a child, she used to climb the tall tree in their yard and sit there reading for hours. Her headstone was simple, made of gray granite, engraved with Isabel Marie Whitmore, 1989, 2013, beloved daughter. She painted the world with her dreams. Richard refused any grand memorials. Isabel hated extravagance. She loved simplicity and sincerity, the very qualities Richard had forgotten while she was alive. This was the 10th year, a round milestone, heavier than all the others. That morning, Richard woke before dawn. From 3 a.m., he lay staring at the ceiling as memories of Isabel drifted through his mind like old film reels. Isabel at 3, laughing in his arms. Isabel at 10, proudly showing him her painting. And Isabel at 18, looking at him with sad eyes. At 6, Richard put on a simple black suit, the old one Isabel once said she liked because you look more like a normal dad when you wear it. He carried a single red rose, her favorite. Richard had no idea that today's visit would rewrite the rest of his life. Because on the other side of the hill, beneath that ancient oak tree, stood a man, a janitor with calloused hands, silently visiting Isabel's grave. Beside him, a small child was carefully placing tiny stones on the headstone. Who were they? And why were they crying at his daughter's grave? If you're watching this story, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because what comes next will keep you glued to the screen. Sometimes the biggest secrets aren't hidden in documents. They rest silently between two graves. That morning, Richard didn't let the driver take the wheel. He wanted to be alone. The black Mercedes S-Class quietly exited the underground garage of the Whitmore Tower, rolling along FDR Drive where the East River reflected the first light of dawn. The city was waking up. Joggers moved along the riverfront, small coffee shops lifted their shutters, and the smell of toasted bread drifted in the breeze. Life went on, even though inside Richard, time seemed to freeze whenever he thought of Isabel. As the car moved across the Brooklyn Bridge, the sun rose behind Manhattan's skyline, painting the sky in vibrant streaks of orange and pink. Isabel had loved mornings like this. She once said, "Every sunrise is a painting the universe makes by hand, Dad, and no two are ever the same." The memory tightened something in his chest. Richard drove slowly through the old streets of Brooklyn, rows of brownstones, artsy cafes, vintage shops emitting a nostalgic charm. 10 years had passed, and the neighborhood had changed in many ways. But Greenwood Cemetery remained the same, quiet, ancient, seemingly untouched by time. When he parked and stepped out of the car, Richard felt his heartbeat accelerate in an unfamiliar, uneasy rhythm. 10 years. Yet the pain remained as raw as it had been on that fateful morning. Some wounds, perhaps, never heal. Some losses time can only circle around, never truly cross. Holding the red rose, he walked up the stone path that led to the hill where Isabel rested. A gentle wind blew, trembling the leaves of the old oak tree. Then, in the stillness of the place, Richard heard a sound. At first, he thought he imagined it, a trick of memory. But no, it was unmistakably crying. Real, broken sobs, tearing through the quiet like a jagged rip. Richard quickened his steps, heart pounding, and when he rounded a cluster of red maples, the sight before him made him stop. In front of Isabel's grave, a man was kneeling, his shoulders shaking, his face buried in his hands as he cried. The kind of cry that sounded like it came from the deepest part of someone's soul. Next to him, a girl about 9 years old sat on the ground, carefully arranging small stones into a little pyramid. Her purple jacket was worn, her brown curly hair tied into 2 pigtails, and her sneakers looked slightly too big. hand-me-downs from someone else. Richard froze. This was the most sacred place he had, a private sanctuary meant only for him and Isabel. Who were these people? And why were they here, right in front of his daughter's grave? The man still hadn't realized someone was behind him. He kept crying, the kind of stifled, restrained sobs that carried the weight of 10 years of regret. But the little girl lifted her head. Her eyes met Richard's, and in that instant, time stopped. Those eyes. Richard recognized them immediately. They were identical to Isabel's. Deep blue, with tiny golden flecks around the iris and a slight upward curve at the outer corners, just like when she smiled. His heart seemed to stop. He stared at the child, a wave of confusion and fear washing through him. "Excuse me," Richard said, trying to keep his voice steady. "This is my daughter's grave. Who are you?" The man startled and turned around, his eyes red. He looked to be in his 30s, with messy brown hair and a pale face. "Oh, God. I'm sorry. My name is Darius Holt, and this is Amara. Why are you here? Why are you crying at my daughter's grave?" Darius looked down at the grave, then back up. I came to visit my sister, Elena. Her grave is over there, but I also visit Isabel, because she mattered so much to someone I loved very dearly, and because—" He hesitated, glancing at Amara. "Because what?" Richard asked, his heart beating faster. Darius took a breath. "Because Amara. Amara is Isabel's daughter." The words hit like a punch to the gut. Richard staggered, gripping the oak tree for balance. The rose slipped from his hand onto the blanket of fallen leaves, a deep red against the golds and browns of autumn. "What?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "What? What did you just say?" "Amara is Isabel's child," Darius repeated, firmer this time but still full of emotion. "And Adrian Cole's, my best friend." Richard stared at the girl. Amara gazed back, those deep, clear blue eyes, Isabel's eyes. She didn't understand the weight of what had just been said. "Mister," Amara said softly, her voice like a tiny bell. "Are you sad? My dad says people come here when they're sad." Richard's throat tightened painfully. He knelt down so he was eye level with the child. Up close, he saw even more, the slightly upturned nose, the tiny frown of concentration, the soft curl at the ends of her hair. All of it was Isabel. "Hello," he said, voice trembling. "You're Amara, right?" She nodded. "Yes, I'm 9. I'm building pretty stones for Mommy." She pointed to the small pyramid of pebbles she had balanced so carefully. "Your mother," Richard repeated, his throat closing. Darius stepped forward and placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Amara, sweetheart, go over there and find a few more stones, okay?" He gestured to a path farther away. "Daddy needs to talk to this man for a minute." Amara looked between them, then nodded. "Okay, but you have to help me build it later." "I promise, my love." The girl skipped away, her 2 big sneakers clapping against the stone path. Richard watched her go, his heart thundering like a drum. When Amara was far enough, Richard turned back. "Explain," he said, trying to stay calm, though his voice still shook. "Everything. Right now." Darius sat down on the grass, leaning against a nearby headstone. His eyes were still swollen. "Adrian Cole was my best friend from high school," he began. "He met Isabel in an art class at the Brooklyn Community Center about 11 years ago." Richard stood still, trying to piece things together. Isabel took art classes? He didn't know. He had never asked what she liked, what she did. "They fell in love," Darius continued, fast and deeply. "Adrian told me Isabel was the woman he wanted forever. They planned a future, a little house upstate, a couple of kids, a dog, a simple life." His voice faltered. He had to swallow hard. Richard felt his own legs weaken and slowly lowered himself onto the cold ground, not caring about the expensive suit. "Why didn't I know?" he asked faintly. "Why didn't Isabel tell me?" Darius looked at him, and in his eyes was a blend of sympathy and reproach. Because she was scared. Scared you wouldn't approve. Adrian wasn't wealthy. He was a carpenter, lived in Bed-Stuy. Isabel said her father always had big plans for her. You wanted her to marry someone from your world, someone who could expand the Whitmore empire. "No," Richard protested, but even he heard the hollowness in his voice. He had had expectations. He had tried to shape her path without asking what she wanted. "And there was one more reason," Darius said quietly. "She said you were never there. She tried reaching out, many times, but you were always busy. Meetings, deals, business trips. Eventually, she stopped trying." Each word was another stone thrown at his chest, and he had no defense. He had been absent. He had buried himself in work. He had missed his daughter's entire life. "Tell me about them," Richard said, voice breaking. "About Adrian and Isabel. I need to know." Darius looked toward Amara, who was gathering stones in the distance. A sad smile tugged at his lips. "They were beautiful together," he said. "Adrian made Isabel laugh, the kind of laugh that comes from deep in the chest. They spent hours in his woodshop. Adrian carving and sanding, Isabel sketching, soft music playing, talking about everything." Richard pictured that. His daughter peaceful, happy, living a life he had never imagined for her. "Did he propose?" Richard asked. "He did," Darius nodded. "One summer evening on the Brooklyn Bridge. No flashy diamond, just a silver ring Adrian made himself, with a blue stone, Isabel's favorite color. She said yes, immediately." Tears streamed down Richard's face. He didn't wipe them. His daughter had been engaged. She had mapped out a life, and he had known nothing. "And Amara?" he whispered. "Isabel got pregnant and gave birth 2 months before the accident," Darius said. "They were over the moon. They found a bigger apartment. Adrian took extra shifts. Isabel painted murals for the baby's room. Animals, forests, starry skies." He stopped, wiping his eyes. "And then, that night happened." Richard knew the broad strokes. The car lost control in the rain, broke through the railing. But now he wanted the full truth. "Elena, my sister, was driving," Darius said, his voice heavy. She and Isabel had been close since high school. That night, they went to an art exhibit in Manhattan. Adrian wanted to go but had the flu and told Isabel to stay home. She still wanted to support her friend on her first show. He inhaled deeply. Elena had 1 glass of wine. Just one. But maybe she was tired, and the roads were slick. On the way back over the bridge, she lost control. The car slid, hit the railing, and then he stopped. There was no need to finish. Richard already knew the rest. People had told him they died instantly, which is kinder. As if that were comfort. "How did Adrian survive?" Richard asked softly. "He didn't," Darius said bitterly. "Not really. His body kept going. But his soul died with Isabel that night." "In the first weeks, Adrian couldn't get out of bed," Darius continued. "I stayed with him, made sure he ate, made sure he didn't do something reckless. He cried nonstop, kept blaming himself. If only I'd been there. If only I'd stopped her. It's my fault." Then, for Amara's sake, he forced himself to keep living. "Adrian was the most devoted father I've ever seen," Darius said. "He learned how to bottle feed, change diapers, rock her to sleep. He turned his wood shop into a tiny warm home. He worked nights after Amara fell asleep, so he could spend the daytime with her." Richard listened, heart aching. Adrian, a man he had never met, had done everything he, Richard, had failed to do for his own children. Adrian had been present. He had loved. He had sacrificed. Adrian raised Amara for 3 years, Darius said, voice weighted. 3 beautiful, difficult years. He loved her with everything he had. But the grief of losing Isabel never left him. It was always there, like a shadow. Then one day, when Amara had just turned 3, Adrian had an accident at a construction site. A wooden beam fell from above and struck his head. He died instantly. I was Adrian's designated guardian, Darius said. I took Amara in, and I tried contacting you. 3 calls to your office after Adrian died. 3 messages. You never called back. Richard shuddered. I didn't know. God, I truly didn't know. Darius pulled an old envelope from his pocket. Adrian kept this letter. Isabel wrote it to a friend, but never got to send it. Richard opened it with trembling fingers. The delicate handwriting, unmistakably Isabel's. Dear Sarah, I'm pregnant. Adrian and I are having a baby. I'm both happy and terrified. I haven't told my dad. He won't accept Adrian, not because Adrian isn't good, but because he's not the type of man my dad wants for me. But Sarah, Adrian is everything I need. We've decided that after the baby is born, we'll leave New York, Vermont or Maine, somewhere quiet. I'll paint, Adrian will work with wood, and we'll be happy. I know it means being far from family. Part of me is sad. I used to think one day my dad would change, but I can't wait forever. If my dad asks, tell him I'm okay. I'm happy. And maybe one day, when the baby is older, I'll give him a chance to be a grandfather. Everyone deserves a second chance. Right? Love, Isabel. By the time he finished, tears blurred the words. His daughter had been happy. She had plans, dreams. She had even intended to give him a second chance. But that chance had never come. Before Richard could respond, Amara ran back, her hands full of stones. Daddy, look! Her eyes sparkled. I found a pink one. They're super rare. Darius smiled despite the redness of his eyes. Beautiful, sweetheart. Amara turned to Richard, studying him curiously. Who are you? She asked, tilting her head. Richard opened his mouth, but the words stuck in his throat. How could he tell this child, his own flesh and blood, who he was? Darius placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Honey, this is Mr. Richard. He's your grandfather. Amara stared, her brows knitting. Grandfather? She repeated, tasting the word. Then slowly, understanding dawned. So, he's Mommy's dad? Yes, Darius said softly. Amara went quiet, looking down at the stones in her hands. Then she lifted her eyes to Richard. Did my mommy ever talk about you? The question cut deep, sharp as a blade. Richard didn't know how to answer. What had Isabel told Adrian about him? That he was absent? That he had failed her? Then he remembered the last line of the letter. Everyone deserves a second chance. Your mom loved me, he finally said, voice shaking. And I loved her, very much. I just wasn't very good at showing it. Amara considered this, then nodded. That's okay. My dad says, grown-ups sometimes aren't good at saying what they feel. A broken smile touched Richard's lips, tears still falling. Your dad was a very wise man. I know, Amara replied seriously. Then she held up the pink stone. Do you want to help me build? Richard looked at the stone, then at the small face before him. Isabel's eyes looking back at him with a simple trust he didn't deserve, yet longed for desperately. I'd love to, he said, reaching out. Amara placed the stone in his palm. The light touch, warm and real, felt like a promise. In the days after the encounter at the cemetery, Richard couldn't stop thinking about Amara. The little girl's eyes slipped into both his dreams and his waking hours. He dug through old photos of Isabel, trying to trace the shared features, the invisible threads binding them. He needed to know more. He needed to understand. Richard hired a private investigator, not to dig up dirt, but to verify Darius Holt's story. The report came back 3 days later and confirmed every word he had said. Darius Holt, 30 years old. Worked at Greenwood Cemetery for 7 years, previously an electrician. Lived with Amara in a one-bedroom apartment in Sunset Park. No criminal record. Neighbors referred to him as a devoted father. His financial records showed that Darius lived extremely modestly. An annual income of about $38,000, a tight amount in New York. No debt except for a small student loan. Rent always paid on time. Amara's school records, local public school, grades from average to good. Teachers described her as cheerful, creative, sometimes a little shy. Richard also managed to find old news pieces. The accident 10 years ago that took Isabel and Elena, and another article 3 years later about Adrian Cole, a 26-year-old carpenter killed at a construction site. Each detail fit neatly into Darius's story, and each piece added more weight to the guilt pressing on Richard's chest. A week after their first meeting, Richard went back to Greenwood. This time, he didn't walk straight to Isabel's grave. He went looking for Darius. He found him in the old section, trimming shrubs around moss-covered headstones. Work uniform, jeans, a flannel shirt, leather gloves, his hair tied back in a low ponytail. "Mr. Whitmore," Darius said in surprise, pulling off his gloves. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." "Call me Richard," he replied. "I'd like to talk, if you have a moment." Darius glanced at his watch. "I'm on a 10-minute break. There's a wooden bench over there." They sat beneath a large maple, its yellow leaves drifting down slowly like lazy second hands on a clock. A brief silence stretched out. Richard didn't know where to begin. "I had your story verified," he finally said. "Not because I didn't believe you, but because I needed certainty. I needed to know this wasn't a mistake or some dream." Darius nodded. "I understand." "Amara really is my granddaughter," Richard blurted, still tasting the strangeness of the words. "Isabel's child. And I've missed the first 10 years of her life." "Not entirely," Darius said gently. "You haven't missed everything. You can still be present in her future, if you want to be." "I do," Richard answered, his voice urgent. "But I don't know where to start. I failed Isabel and Marcus. I don't know how to be a grandfather. I don't know how to show up." Darius looked at him, and in his brown eyes there was no judgment, only understanding. "The first step is to admit that," he said. "You just did. Step 2, decide you'll do things differently. Step 3, keep showing up, over and over again." "I want to see Amara again," Richard said. "Properly. Not at the cemetery, but somewhere she feels comfortable. Would you agree to that?" Darius considered this. "I have to think about what's best for Amara. She's been through a lot already. Lost her mother before she was born, lost her father at 3. I don't want her hurt again." "I understand," Richard nodded. "I won't pressure you. I only ask that you consider it. I want to know her. I want to be part of her life, if she'll let me." Darius was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I'll talk to Amara. I'll see how she feels. If she wants to meet, we'll arrange it, on her terms and at her pace." "Thank you," Richard exhaled. "That's all I can ask for." 3 days later, Richard's phone rang from an unfamiliar number. "I talked to Amara," Darius's voice came through. "She's curious about you. She asked what you look like, what you do, and why you're only showing up now. I tried to explain honestly, but gently." "What did she say?" Richard asked, heart pounding. "She wants to meet," Darius replied, "but she chose the park. Open space makes her feel safe." "Which park?" "Prospect Park. It's where we usually go. Near Long Meadow, there's a playground Amara loves. Saturday, 10 a.m. Does that work?" I'll be there, Richard said. On Saturday morning, Richard woke up wrapped in a mix of nerves and fear. He chose jeans and a sweater, trying to look as normal as possible, and drove himself to Brooklyn. Prospect Park on a bright autumn morning was blazing with color. Trees exploding in orange, yellow, and red. Children racing across the grass. Runners and cyclists filling the winding paths. A world made of simple joys, and one that felt strangely foreign to Richard. He found the playground, swings, slides, tangled climbing frames filled with laughter. Near one of the swings stood Darius and Amara. Amara wore an orange jacket and purple leggings. Her hair was tied up high. She was on the swing, legs carving arcs through the air, her face glowing. "Richard," Darius waved. Amara saw him and dragged her feet against the ground to slow down. Richard walked over, his heart thudding. "Hi, Amara," he said, trying to keep his voice light. "Do you remember me?" Amara nodded seriously. "Yes, you're my grandpa." "That's right," Richard said, kneeling to be level with her. "And I'm very happy to see you again. Dad says you want to spend time with me." Amara tilted her head. "Why?" The direct, innocent question made Richard falter. He glanced at Darius, who just gave a small, encouraging shrug, signaling that this was Richard's step to take. "Because," Richard chose his words carefully, "I loved your mom very much, and when I found out about you, I wanted to get to know you, because you're a part of her, and you're also a part of me." Amara thought for a moment. "Did my mom miss you?" she asked. "I believe she did," Richard answered, his voice tight. "She loved me, even though sometimes I made her sad, and I think she would want us to know each other." Amara nodded slowly. "Okay. Will you push the swing for me?" The simple request almost brought Richard to tears. "I'd love to," he said. Richard pushed the swing, and Amara laughed every time she went higher. They walked together, Amara skipping ahead to collect fallen leaves. They stopped by a cafe where Richard bought hot chocolate and cookies. "What do you do for work?" Amara asked. "I build and own buildings," he said. "So you're a very rich person?" "I have a lot of money." "Yes," he replied. "But I've learned that money doesn't make people truly happy. Happiness is being with the people you love." Amara nodded as if that were obvious. "I love my dad," she said. "And he loves you," Darius said, ruffling her hair. As the afternoon drew to a close, Richard gathered his courage to ask, "Darius, Amara, I've been thinking about the two of you coming to my home one day. I'd like to show Amara some of Isabel's paintings, and I have a few other things. Photos, small keepsakes, I think she might want to see." Darius looked at Amara, who nodded enthusiastically. "I want to see my mom's paintings," she said. "Okay," Darius agreed, though still cautious. "But you have to understand, Amara isn't used to your kind of lifestyle. I don't want her to feel overwhelmed." "I understand," Richard said. "I'll be careful, I promise." They agreed on the following weekend. As Darius and Amara were getting ready to leave, Amara ran back to Richard and hugged him, a quick, tight hug. But to him, it meant everything. "Bye, Grandpa Richard," she said, then sprinted off after Darius. Richard stood there, watching them go, his chest still warm from the embrace. "Grandpa Richard." The words filled his heart with both joy and sorrow. He had a second chance. He would not waste it. Near the end of the afternoon, Richard gathered his courage once more. "Darius, Amara, I'd like to invite you both to my place sometime. I want to show Amara Isabel's paintings, and a few other things, photos, mementos, things she might like to see." Darius looked at Amara. She nodded eagerly. "I want to see Mommy's paintings." "All right," Darius agreed, still cautious. "But please understand, Amara isn't used to your lifestyle. I don't want her to be overwhelmed." "I understand," Richard promised. I'll be careful." They set a date for the following weekend. Before leaving, Amara ran back and hugged Richard. A quick, firm hug that warmed his chest. "Bye, Grandpa Richard," she said, then trotted off after Darius. Richard stood watching them, his hand still tingling with the warmth of her embrace. Grandpa Richard, two words that were both heavy and light, filling his heart with a mix of joy and grief. He had been given a second chance, and this time he would not let it slip away. The following Saturday, Darius and Amara arrived at Richard's penthouse. Marcus, the driver, picked them up from the lobby and took the private elevator straight to the apartment. When the doors opened, Amara's eyes widened. "Whoa," she breathed, standing in the middle of the high-ceilinged space, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking all of Manhattan, minimalist modern furniture everywhere. "This place is bigger than my whole building," she whispered to Darius. Darius looked slightly embarrassed. His eyes scanned the luxury with a mix of curiosity and reserve. Richard noticed the discomfort in him and suddenly felt a wave of shame. This was his world, overflowing, extravagant, yet it felt strangely hollow when he thought about the small, warm apartment where Amara had grown up. "Make yourselves at home," Richard said, fully aware of how awkward the sentence sounded in this setting. Richard led them to his study, where Isabel's paintings hung on the walls. One watercolor, a lake nestled between rolling hills, sunset brushed in orange-pink-purple. "This was painted by your mom," he said softly. "My mom painted that?" Amara's eyes widened. "Yes, she painted it when she was 19. She dreamed of living near a lake like that." There was a pencil sketch, a sleeping baby. In the margin, "For my child, one day." Amara froze. "Is that me?" Richard knelt beside her. "I believe it is. Your mom dreamed about you." "My mom dreamed about me," Amara whispered, gently touching the glass. Richard brought out a large box, photos, letters, and keepsakes from Isabel. Amara sat cross-legged on the rug, Darius beside her. She lifted each item with care. Pictures of Isabel as a little girl, her teenage journals, a tiny lion pendant. "These belong to your mom. I want you to have them," Richard said. Amara held it delicately. Darius helped her put it on. She touched the small pendant, wearing a soft, bittersweet smile. While Amara examined the keepsakes, Darius walked toward the window, looking down at the city. Richard joined him. "I never thought I'd ever stand in a place like this," Darius said quietly, not envious, not impressed, just stating a fact. "Feels like another world." "It is another world," Richard admitted, "and for a long time, it was the only world I knew. But in the end, it's empty. All of this," he gestured around the luxurious apartment, "means nothing if there's no one to share it with." Darius turned to him. "So why change now, after all these years?" "Because meeting Amara showed me what I've really lost. Not just Isabel, but the chance to have a real family. I don't want to waste any more time." "Amara deserves better than a grandfather who shows up because he feels guilty," Darius said bluntly. "You're right," Richard replied without hesitation. "But it's not just guilt. It's love. I loved my daughter. I just didn't know how to show it. And I loved Amara the moment I saw her eyes, because she's part of Isabel, and because she deserves to know she has family." Darius considered him for a long moment. "It won't be easy. Trust takes time. And Amara, I've kept her away from this world for a reason. I don't want money and privilege to spoil her." "I don't want that either," Richard said. "I just want to be present." Darius nodded slowly. "Fine, but on my terms. We take it slow. And if at any point I feel this isn't good for Amara, we stop. Agreed?" "Agreed," Richard answered immediately. From that day on, Richard visited Brooklyn every weekend, sometimes at the park, sometimes at Darius's small apartment. He brought small, thoughtful gifts. A quality watercolor set when he learned Amara loved painting. A book about constellations when she mentioned she liked looking at the night sky. A soft wool scarf when the wind turned cold. He learned to listen, truly listen, when Amara talked about school, friends, and dreams. He sat on the floor building Lego towers, drew pictures with her, or watched her favorite animated movies. One afternoon, Amara asked, "Did you know things about my mom when she was little?" Richard told her, when Isabel was 6, she painted butterflies and flowers all over her bedroom wall. "I was furious," he said, and she just laughed and said, "Dad, now you have free art." Amara burst into giggles, her eyes sparkling. "My mom sounds fun." "She was," Richard smiled sadly. "I just wish I'd spent more time seeing that." Not everything was easy. Some days, Amara asked questions that left Richard speechless. "Why didn't you come to my mom when she was still alive?" Richard was silent for a long time. In the kitchen, Darius froze mid-motion, but didn't step in. "I was wrong," Richard finally said. "I thought work was more important than family. I thought money and success would make me happy. By the time I realized the truth, your mom was gone." "Were you sad?" "Every day," Richard admitted, "but being with you makes me feel closer to her. You have her smile, her curiosity, her gentle heart." Amara thought about it, then climbed onto the sofa and leaned her head on his shoulder. "You can be sad, but you're not alone, because now you have me." The simple, innocent words unlocked something inside Richard. He held the girl close and let the tears fall. Richard gradually learned the rhythm of Darius and Amara's life. Difficult, but warm. He saw Darius juggling bills, taking weekend shifts so Amara could have warm clothes and full meals. Simple dinners, pasta, soup, sandwiches, always with Amara eating first. One evening, Richard brought over an expensive Italian takeout meal. The look on Darius's face, grateful yet tense, told Richard he'd misstepped. "I'm sorry," Richard said quickly. "I just wanted to contribute dinner." "I know your intention is good," Darius sighed. "But we don't need charity. We're okay. Not much, but we have each other." "I don't see it as charity," Richard replied. "I see it as sharing dinner, as family. But next time, I'll ask first." Darius looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Thank you." They had dinner together, fancy Italian dishes on old Formica plates. The air warmed gradually. Amara chattered about school, her painting, and the cat she wanted, but their building didn't allow. It was these everyday slices of life that made Richard realize just how much he had missed. As the cold wind rolled in, Richard invited Amara to learn ice skating at the outdoor rink in Prospect Park. "I've never skated before." Amara's eyes lit up. Richard, who'd learned as a child at private rinks, found himself in an unfamiliar role, the teacher. He held her hand, guiding her step by step. "Bend your knees a little," he instructed. "Push out with your foot. Yes, just like that." Amara fell repeatedly, laughing every time she got up. Darius stumbled even more, making Amara laugh so hard her face turned red. "Dad looks like a penguin," she squealed. By the end of the session, Amara could skate on her own, and Darius no longer clung to the rail. The three of them warmed their hands at the hot chocolate stand, cheeks flushed from cold and excitement. "Today is the best day ever," Amara cheered, slurping the last bit of syrup. Richard looked at her, heart full. Family was built from moments like this, not money or gifts, but time and presence. One night, after Amara had gone to bed, Darius made tea. They sat at the small kitchen table. "Thank you," Richard said quietly, "for giving me a chance, for trusting me with Amara." "Don't thank me yet," Darius smiled faintly. "You're still passing the test." "I know," Richard said, "and I'll keep trying, every day." Darius looked down at his cup. Honestly, when I first saw you at the cemetery, I thought you were the kind of privileged billionaire who'd try to buy his way into Amara's life. But you surprised me. Surprised you how? By showing up, consistently, by listening, by trying to understand our life instead of forcing it to match yours. That's worth more than any gift. Richard fell silent, moved. Adrian, he was a good father, wasn't he? The best, Darius said softly. He loved Amara more than anything. And he would want her to know you, to know family. Do you think Adrian would accept me? Darius thought for a moment. At first, he'd probably be unsure. But if he saw you love Amara and work for her, I believe he would. As Christmas approached, Richard invited them for dinner at the penthouse. Darius hesitated, but Amara was so excited he agreed. Richard hired a chef, but requested a warm, simple meal. Turkey, mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables, pie. Nothing extravagant. He prepared thoughtful gifts. For Amara, an easel and a good set of oil paints to nurture her talent. For Darius, a durable winter coat, not flashy, but practical. On Christmas Eve, the penthouse was decorated simply. A tree, a wreath, soft music. "It's so pretty," Amara exclaimed at the sight of the tree. They sat down to eat. For the first time in years, Richard's penthouse felt like a home, filled with laughter, conversation, and a sense of belonging. When it was time for gifts, Amara hugged Richard tightly upon seeing the easel. "Grandpa, it's perfect." Darius opened his gift, a winter coat, and Richard caught a flicker of gratitude, relief. His old coat had a tear at the elbow, and, perhaps, a bit of acceptance. "Thank you," he said simply. Then Amara handed Richard her gift, wrapped in newspaper, taped unevenly. Inside was a painting she had made. Richard, Darius, and Amara, standing before Isabel's grave, holding hands. Above them, a starry sky. Among the stars, a long-haired woman smiled down at them. "That's my mom," Amara whispered. "I think she's watching us from up there." Richard couldn't say a word. He pulled Amara into his arms and let the tears fall freely. "Thank you," he whispered. "This is the most beautiful gift I've ever received." As his bond with Amara deepened, Richard realized he could no longer avoid Marcus. 4 years of silence. The gap between father and son had become a canyon almost impossible to bridge. But Amara deserved to know her family fully, and Marcus deserved to know about her. One evening, Richard picked up the phone, his hand slightly shaking. "Marcus, it's Dad." A long pause. "I know. Your name shows up on the screen. Can you talk?" "About what?" "About family, about Isabel, and about your niece." "What?" They arranged to meet the next morning at a quiet cafe in the West Village, somewhere neutral, far from both Richard's penthouse and Marcus's architecture studio in Tribeca. Richard arrived early, his stomach twisted with nerves. When Marcus walked in, he almost didn't recognize his son. 36 now, more grounded, with a touch of gray at his temples. Simple sweater, jeans, a messenger bag slung across his chest. The look of a successful architect who had nothing to prove. "Marcus," Richard stood, hesitating between a hug or a handshake. In the end, he chose to simply stand there. "Dad," Marcus gave a small nod and sat down. "You look older." "Time doesn't stand still," Richard tried to joke. Strained, the server took their orders. 2 hot coffees arrived. Heavy silence settled. "So," Marcus began, "you said niece?" Richard took a deep breath and told him everything. The encounter at the cemetery, Darius, Amara. That Isabel had a daughter the family never knew about. Marcus listened, his face nearly expressionless. When Richard finished, he stayed silent for a long time. "Isabel had a little girl?" he finally said, his voice trembling. "How long have you known about this?" 2 months. And you're telling me only now? There was a low, simmering anger under his words. I'm sorry. I needed time to understand, to start building a connection with her. I was afraid I'd ruin everything from the start. Ruin it how? Marcus let out a bitter half-laugh. Oh, right. The same way you always do. Prioritize work, shut down your feelings, act like a CEO instead of a father. The words stabbed deep, but Richard didn't dodge them this time. You're right. About all of it. I failed you and Isabel. I got my priorities wrong. Now Isabel's gone. My son is distant. And I have one last chance with Amara. I can't lose that. Marcus stared down at his coffee. Do you know what the hardest part of being your son was? Richard shook his head. It wasn't the money. I had everything. Except you. You weren't there for my games, for my recitals. The day I graduated top of my class, you were in Singapore. I sent a gift, Richard said weakly. A Rolex. I was 18. I didn't need a watch. I needed a father. Marcus paused, then continued, his voice sharper. And Isabel, did you know she called me a few months before she died? She was crying. She said she'd met someone, that she was in love. But she was afraid to tell you. I told her to live her life. Then she died. I never knew if she got to be happy before she went. Tears welled up in Richard's eyes. She did. She loved Adrian. They were going to get married, have a family. Marcus wiped at his eyes. At least she had that. They sat there, two grown men quietly crying in the middle of a crowded cafe. A few curious looks drifted their way. Do you want to meet Amara? Richard asked softly. Does she know about me? Marcus asked. She knows she has an uncle. I told her about you, that you're an architect, that you design beautiful buildings. She was excited. Did you tell her we don't talk? He asked. No, I didn't want to make her sad, or make her think family is nothing but drama. Marcus sighed. But sometimes family is messy. That's true, Richard agreed, but it can also heal, if we both try. Marcus looked at his father for a long time. I'm not promising forgiveness, not yet. I'm still angry, but I want to meet her. She's my niece. She's family. That's all I could hope for, Richard said. They chose the Brooklyn Children's Museum for the first meeting, a fun, safe place for Amara. When Marcus arrived, Amara was in the art area, drawing a giant dinosaur on a big sheet of paper. Darius stood nearby, and Richard led Marcus over. Amara, Richard called gently, there's someone who wants to meet you. She looked up, brush still in hand, her curious gaze flicking between Richard and Marcus. This is Uncle Marcus, Richard introduced. My son, your uncle. Amara's eyes lit up. You're the one who designs buildings. Marcus crouched down to her level. That's right. And you must be Amara. I've heard a lot about you. Really? From who? From your grandpa, Marcus said, glancing up at Richard, his expression unreadable. Grandpa Richard says you're really smart and build beautiful things, Amara said. I'm trying, Marcus smiled. Do you like drawing? I love it. My mom drew too. Dad says I draw like her. A flicker of emotion crossed Marcus's face, sadness and tenderness mixed. Your Aunt Isabel was amazing. She used to draw dragons and castles and spaceships just for me. Really? I can draw those. Want to see? I'd love to. Amara tugged him over to the table and began showing him each of her drawings. Marcus studied them carefully, asking questions, praising her choices. Richard and Darius watched from a distance. He's good with her, Darius murmured. Marcus has always been gentle with kids, Richard replied. He used to look after Isabel when they were little. He'll be a good father, someday. Does he have a family? Darius asked. No. He was engaged once, but called it off. He's afraid of repeating my mistakes, putting work before family. After leaving the museum, the group stopped at a local pizza place. Amara sat between the two men, chatting non-stop about the city-building block room. I built a skyscraper. Not as tall as Grandpa's building, but it was pretty good. I'm sure it was, Marcus laughed. When it was time to say goodbye, Amara hugged Marcus. Will you come again? She asked. Marcus looked at her, then at Richard. Yes, I'll come again, he said. Darius walked Amara ahead. Marcus stayed back with Richard on the sidewalk, the cold wind slipping under their collars. She's special, Marcus said. Yeah, Richard nodded. And you're really trying, Marcus continued. With her. I can see that. All I want is not to repeat my mistakes with you and Isabel. That doesn't erase the past, Marcus said slowly. But it's a start. That's all I'm hoping for, Richard replied. Marcus nodded. I'll call you. Maybe we can have dinner. Just the two of us. Talk more. I'd like that, Richard said, hope warming his voice. Marcus turned to go, then stopped without looking back. Dad, I'm not promising things will be okay right away, but I want to try. Thank you, Richard whispered. As time passed, Richard began to notice the cracks in Darius's life. A constant weariness clung to him, with premature streaks of gray in his hair, despite being only in his early 30s. Sometimes, right in the middle of a conversation, Darius stepped into the hallway to take phone calls, his voice restrained, as if he were trying to hold something together. One afternoon, when Richard stopped by the apartment, he found Darius sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by a jumble of bills. Amara was still at school. Darius, Richard called gently, even though the door had been left open. Are you okay? Darius looked up, eyes reddened. I truly don't know what else I can do, he said, voice breaking. Do about what? Everything. He gestured toward the pile of papers. Rent went up. Amara needs new shoes. She grows so fast. The heater broke. The landlord told me to fix it myself. And the cemetery cut winter hours because of budget issues. Richard sat beside him, scanning the numbers. The total wasn't massive by his standards, around $3,000, but with Darius's income, it might as well have been a brick wall. Let me help, Richard said. No. Darius answered instantly. I don't want charity. It's not charity, Richard said softly. It's family helping family. Amara is my granddaughter. You've carried everything alone for 9 years. Let me carry part of it. I don't want to owe you. Then treat it as a loan. Pay me back when things settle. But right now, don't let these bills suffocate you. Darius stared at him for a long time, pride and practicality pulling at him in opposite directions. I'll think about it, he said. Richard didn't wait for the answer. A few days later, he quietly took action. He asked his lawyer to prepay 6 months of rent, anonymously. The heater issue was handled through a building maintenance program, also anonymously. Then he did something else. He called the Greenwood Cemetery manager, an old acquaintance from the real estate world. Richard didn't ask for special treatment. He simply inquired whether there were any stable positions with better pay that matched Darius's skills. The manager, who already valued Darius, agreed to offer an interview for a maintenance coordinator position, a hybrid administrative field role with an $8,000 annual raise. When Darius received the interview invitation, he immediately sought out Richard, suspicion in his eyes. Did you have anything to do with this? He asked. I told the manager you're reliable, Richard replied honestly. The decision is theirs. You still have to interview properly. Why are you doing this? Because Amara needs a stable home. And because you deserve not to worry about rent every month. And because we're friends now, Darius. Friends help each other. The doubt in Darius's eyes softened. If I get this job, it's because I deserve it. Not because of your money." "That's exactly what I'm hoping for." A week later, Darius got the job, on the strength of his experience and his calm competence. Not everything went smoothly. In February, Amara's teacher called Darius in for a meeting, and Richard, now listed as emergency contact, was invited as well. In bright, colorful room filled with student art, Ms. Thompson, a gentle middle-aged woman, explained, "Amara is a wonderful student, smart, creative, kind, but recently she's changed." "In what way?" Darius gripped the arm of the chair. "She's withdrawn. She sits alone at recess. She still does her work, but with an 'I just need to finish' attitude, as if she suddenly doesn't care." Hearing that, something twisted in Richard's stomach. Had his presence disrupted the delicate balance of her young world? "Has she said anything?" Darius asked. "When I ask, she says, 'I'm fine.' But my instincts say otherwise." That evening, the three of them sat together in the small kitchen. Dinner a bowl of mac and cheese, Amara's favorite, cooked by Darius. "Sweetheart," Darius began gently, "your grandpa and I met with Ms. Thompson today." Amara looked down at her plate. "I know." "She said you've been sad," Richard said, "and we want to help. But we need you to tell us what's bothering you." The girl was silent for a long time, then whispered, "The kids at school asked why I have two dads." Darius and Richard exchanged a quick glance. "Two dads?" "Dad and Grandpa," Amara explained. "They asked why sometimes Grandpa Richard picks me up, and why Dad is my dad if he's not Grandpa's son. And I didn't know what to say." Richard's heart sank. In his effort to be part of her life, he hadn't considered how complicated this might feel to her. "What did you tell your friends?" Darius asked gently. "I told them the truth, that Grandpa is my mom's dad, and Dad is the one who raised me after Mom, and my dad died. But they asked more questions, so many, and I felt weird." She sniffled. "I just want to be normal," she whispered. "I want a mom and a dad like everyone else. I want things not to be so complicated." Richard felt heat in his eyes. "I'm sorry. If my being here made things harder—" "No," Amara looked up quickly. "I don't want you to leave. I like having you. It's just, sometimes I wish everything was simpler." They consulted the school counselor. The advice: be open about their family structure. Teach Amara how to tell her story with confidence. They also asked Ms. Thompson to incorporate a lesson about different family types: single parents, guardians, grandparents, adoptive families, to normalize diversity. At home, they talked to her. "Some kids have one mother," Darius said. "Some have two fathers, some live with grandparents. You have a dad and a grandpa, both who love you. There's no right or wrong kind of family." Richard added with a smile, "And I think our family is pretty wonderful. It's full of love." Amara thought about it. "So I can tell my friends my family is special in its own way?" "Exactly," Darius said, ruffling her hair. After that, Amara gradually opened up again. Ms. Bourdie Thompson reported she was playing with her classmates and doing her schoolwork with care once more. Meanwhile, Richard and Marcus slowly eased their distance. They met for dinner once a month. Awkward at first, full of pauses, but eventually conversations became natural. Marcus talked about his work, projects not flashy but full of soul and community. For the first time in years, Richard listened without interrupting. "I always wanted to do this," Marcus said over one dinner. "Create spaces people actually live in, not just occupy." "That's admirable," Richard replied, "and I'm sorry if I ever made you feel your work was lesser." "You did," Marcus said, without resentment, just stating a fact. "But I found my own path." "I'm proud of you," Richard said, voice thick. "I should have said that sooner." A genuine smile crossed Marcus's face. "Thank you, Dad. That means more than you know." Marcus also spent more time with Amara. He took her to his studio, showed her models, explained structures, lighting, ventilation. Amara, who loved making things, listened as if drinking in every word. "Can I design something too?" she asked eagerly. "Of course," Marcus said, handing her paper and pencil. "Let's make a proper architect's dollhouse, shall we?" From then on, they had a monthly project. Amara sketching ideas, while Marcus showed her how to draw elevations, angles, proportions. It became a silk thread connecting uncle and niece, strong, gentle, and warm. In those months, the little family learned how to breathe together, easing the pressure of money with subtle help, unraveling school anxieties through open dialogue, and slowly repairing the tear between father and son by showing up, steadily, patiently, without fanfare. In March, a woman appeared at Darius's door, tall, red-haired, dressed in an expensive suit, eyes firm and unwavering. "I'm Catherine Whitmore," she said, "Richard's ex-wife. I have a right to meet my granddaughter." Darius froze. "You should talk to Richard first." "I tried. He didn't pick up." "Is Amara home?" "She's at school, and I can't let you see her without Richard agreeing. Let me call him. We'll arrange this properly." Catherine studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine, but I won't be pushed aside. Amara is family, and I intend to be part of her life." That evening, Richard met Catherine at a quiet restaurant, somewhere neutral, calm, away from the detonating weight of old wounds. "Why didn't you tell me?" Catherine demanded the moment they sat down. "About Amara?" "Because I only learned 3 months ago myself," Richard said. "I've been trying to understand, to connect." "And what about me? Isabel was my daughter. Amara is my granddaughter." "We've been divorced 15 years. We barely speak." "Because you hurt me," Catherine snapped. "You put work first. And when Isabel died, I couldn't look at you without remembering everything I'd lost." Richard softened his voice. "I know, and you're right. But I'm trying to be different now. With Amara, with Marcus. I want to be her grandmother," Catherine said quietly. "Please, don't take that from me." "I lost Isabel. Don't let me lose my grandchild, too." Richard looked at the woman who had once been his partner. "All right, but we must be careful. Amara's been through so many changes. I understand. I just want to meet her, to know her." A few weeks later, they arranged a meeting at Prospect Park. Richard, Darius, Amara, and Marcus were all there. Catherine approached, and Amara instinctively tucked herself behind Darius. Catherine dropped to her knees, eyes brimming. "Hello, sweetheart. My name is Catherine. I'm your mother's mother. Your grandmother." Amara looked to Darius, saw him nod, then turned back. "Do you look like my mom?" Catherine smiled through her tears. "People used to say so. Your mom had hair like mine." "And I have my mom's eyes," Amara said softly. "You do," Catherine whispered, "and I'm so happy to finally meet you." For an hour they talked, Catherine showing childhood photos of Isabel, telling stories, answering Amara's endless questions. When it was time to leave, Amara hugged her. "You'll come again, right?" "I promise." Catherine's arrival added another complex layer to the family dynamic. Richard and Catherine had to learn how to coexist, not as a couple, but as two grandparents sharing space, both loving the same child. It wasn't always easy. There were disagreements about boundaries, about gifts — Catherine tended to go overboard — about scheduling. But both of them were committed to doing what was best for Amara, and that commitment guided them through the friction. Marcus, for his part, was glad to have his mother back in his life. The two met regularly, tending to old wounds and filling in the quiet spaces that had long existed between them. "I'm really glad she's here," Marcus told Richard one evening. "The little one deserves to know both her grandparents." "You're right," Richard said. "And I'm sorry I didn't think about that sooner." In this new rhythm, their family, held together by old fractures and new threads, continued moving forward, slowly, carefully, but steadily. And at the center of them all stood Amara, supported by hands that had once been clumsy, but were now learning how to hold each other properly. October came again, 11 years since Isabel's passing. But this year, Richard didn't go to Greenwood alone. The whole family came with him. Richard, Marcus, Catherine, Darius, and little Amara. They walked together, not perfect, but united, to honor Isabel. The day was warm, sunlight spilling gold across the headstone. Each brought a gift. Richard, a red rose, as he had for the past 10 years. Marcus, a handwritten letter filled with words he had never said aloud. Catherine, the scarf Isabel once loved. Darius, a photo of Isabel and Adrian laughing together. Amara, a drawing of their family beneath an oak tree, hands intertwined. Above them, she drew a woman with long hair smiling down. "This is my mom," she said. "She's always watching us." They stood in silence, a circle imperfect, but full of love. Richard read Isabel's favorite poem. Marcus shared memories. Catherine cried quietly, taking Richard's hand, for the first time in over a decade. Darius bowed his head. "Isabel," he said softly, "you brought light into Adrian's life. And through Amara, that light continues. Thank you." Amara's small voice followed. "Mom, I don't remember you, but I hear so many beautiful stories. I know you love me, because I feel it every day." After the memorial, they drove to the small lake house in upstate New York, the one Richard had purchased. "I bought this place for us," he said, "a home where family can gather, where Amara can grow up around nature, where we can make new memories." Amara ran to the deck, eyes wide. "It looks just like the picture my mom drew." Richard smiled. "Exactly. That was the idea." They explored the house, a bedroom for Amara, painted a soft lavender overlooking the water, a room for Darius, rooms for Marcus and Catherine, and a sunlit studio where Amara could draw just like her mother. "It's beautiful," Marcus whispered as he stood on the dock. "Isabel would have loved it," Catherine murmured. "That's what I wanted," Richard replied, "to keep her dream alive." They stayed the whole weekend. On the first morning, Richard taught Amara how to fish. They sat on the dock, legs swinging over the water. "Grandpa," she asked, "do you think my mom is watching?" Richard looked up at the endless blue sky. "I'm sure she is, and I think she's smiling, seeing all of us here together." "Do you think she's proud of me?" "More than anything," he whispered. "You are everything she ever wished for. Smart, kind, creative." Amara rested her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Grandpa Richard." "I love you too," he choked out. That afternoon, the whole family made dinner. Chaotic, loud, full of laughter. Marcus chopped salad, Catherine handled dessert, Darius grilled chicken, and Richard managed the potatoes, which burned a little. "You really don't have the talent for this," Marcus teased. "I know," Richard laughed, "but at least I'm trying." They ate on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky orange-pink-violet, just like Isabel used to draw it. "To Isabel," Richard said, lifting his glass. "To Isabel," they echoed. When night fell, Richard sat alone on the dock. The lake lay still, reflecting 1,000 stars. Darius appeared with 2 steaming cups of tea. "I figured you might need this." They sat in comfortable silence. "Amara's happy," Darius finally said. "She has a family now, a home. You made that happen." "Not just me," Richard replied. "All of us. The day we met at the cemetery, I thought you were just another arrogant billionaire." "And did I disappoint you?" Richard smiled faintly. "No," Darius said. "You surprised me. You learned to listen. You changed. At your age, that's not easy." "I had to. For Amara," for Marcus, and for Isabel, even if it's too late. It's never too late, Darius said quietly. She's still watching, and she's proud of you. Richard looked up at the sky. A tear slipped down, not from grief, but from forgiveness finally earned. He whispered, "Thank you, Isabel, for teaching me how to love again and how to live again." As the stars blazed above, Richard Whitmore finally understood. It's never too late to change, never too late to love, never too late to come home, to family, to your heart, to yourself. Family isn't defined by perfection, but by choosing love even when it hurts. Not by avoiding mistakes, but by the courage to stand up each day and try to do better. Those we love, even when they're gone, never truly disappear. They live in our memories, in the goodness they left behind, in the warmth that travels through generations. Isabel once dreamed of a lake house filled with laughter, of a family bound by tenderness, of a life woven with art and joy. She didn't live to see it, but her dream came true. In Amara, the girl with her eyes. In Richard, the father who once lost his way, now finding the road home. In their family, imperfect, but whole. Richard, who once held everything yet felt he had nothing, finally found the one thing that mattered. A family, a purpose, a place to call home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share the video to spread messages of love, forgiveness, and family. See you in the next story, where every wound can become the beginning of something more beautiful.